Welcome to our second episode of Under the Hard Hat. I am Tariq Ibrahim, and I am with the incredible, amazing, super informed, well experienced head of Omar's Engineering, Ammar Omar.
Hey, how's it going, Ty?
Good, good, good. Not bad intro, I think, right?
Yeah,
I thought by the time I was done, you were going to fly out of there. You know what I mean? You were going to be like Superman.
that was, me. I always try to. I'm camera shy, as you all know,
Yeah, sure.
but they
With an
put me on
intro
the
like
spot
that, you
there.
can do anything.
Yeah, right.
So
How's your morning?
it's been a few days since we last did our podcast, and
Hmm.
my understanding is that I got some feedback from a few of my peers, and I thought it was a really great idea. So for people just tuning in right now, why don't we take a minute to just review the idea of behind the hard hat? What is this podcast all about, Omar?
Well, this podcast is all about engineering, architects, developers, entrepreneurs, and everything in between. Um, we have a strong experience in the field now for more than 10 years. And we hear engineers and we hear architects and we hear developers and we hear the city. We hear authority having restrictions. We hear the code. We hear the business. We hear the entrepreneurship part of things. So we said, hey, how can we voice them all out and bring them in while putting a little spice, touch of academia. We shall have guests lining up, professors at universities, recognized universities, of course. We're thinking to bring in, people from the industry and developers, colleagues, engineers, company managers, company principals, owners, CEOs. You know, everyone we were exposed to. We're gonna bring them in, hear them out, have a nice fun discussion, and so our normal Joe can understand that world behind the hard hat.
No, I think it's great because even for me, I would consider myself a normal Joe when it comes to
Yeah,
engineering. You know what I mean? I remember in university, people were walking around with bigger calculators than me, and that's all I really remember about engineering. But really, I think it's an incredible field, right? Like there's a lot of like everything's built. Every building that you see, every skyscraper that you see, every dam that you see, every power plant that you see,
oh,
it's
every
covered
street,
in plans
every
and drawings and efficiencies and ways to be better. And to me, I just open the door, I walk in, I check it out. I'm like, all right, looks pretty good. But there's just so much more involved. And I think this is an
yes.
opportunity for people to understand that from one engineer to another engineer, from one architect to another architect, there's going to be different visions, different struggles, different opinions. And I think this will be where a lot of the action happens on this show. You know what I mean? Because
Oh yes.
people don't know. People just think, okay, we're going to build a building. Let's get some bricks, drop some cement, call it a day. So I think this is great. This is going to be an amazing thing.
Oh yes. You're mentioning. I'm opening the door. You know, architects and every architect have their own door handle preference and door size preferences and everything else and the color of that door. There's a lot of details that we take for granted, as you mentioned. But there's a lot of
No,
work
for sure.
happening
And
behind
it's
this,
even
a lot of
funnier because,
management.
like, some of my actual personal friends, they're trying to build a house. And that's a very simple structure, a couple of thousand square feet, and that's all there is to it. But between him, my friend, and his wife, they're stuck on the foundation. They can't even get past pouring the cement. Everything after that is impossible for them to agree to. So to have a
Yes.
team and a building and a CEO and architects and engineers all come to an agreement, that's
How
that
how we're
that's a
building
thing,
this?
man. That's a thing.
Oh yeah. That's the management part. I always say it's the right path for engineers. Usually, not the right path. I'm saying the usual path for any engineer. They start to manage. They start to manage clients. They start to manage team. They start to manage junior engineers. So I always believe that engineering goes hand in hand with management. So it's a skill that probably we'll discuss in one of our podcasts. We have a friend who's head of department of construction management in one of the universities. We'll make this as later on as a surprise. But yeah, he will discuss with us how detailed uh, engineers need to be when it comes to management. Yeah, so you're right.
No, it's incredible. It's incredible. So, the first thing that I wanted to throw at you, if you will, or discuss with you, has a lot to do with the localization aspect, right? How important is it to have a team from that area versus how important is it to have a team from a completely different geographic region? You know what I mean? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Does it make a difference? Does it matter at all? Can we hire anyone to do it, or is there benefit in having localization in these sort of things?
Well, it's a great question. Short answer, yes. You need to localize your engineers, you need to localize your architects for many reasons. Uh, One of the reason is can be as simple as weather change, weather difference between the temperature where you have your project versus the temperature where your company is located. And a nice example of weather or temperature difference is our mechanical engineers. You'll find, and our mechanical folks can comment, you'll find engineers or lab mechanical engineers who work with HVAC and heating system and cooling system. If you bring someone from, let's say, Arizona and brought them to, where the company is, Alberta, they will have a hard time to adjust in the beginning because the HVAC system, they deal with chillers and how to cool off down south, while here they deal with how to heat up, what's the best way, what's the most energy efficient way, and all the details that comes with it. This can be a big difference. Localizing, for example, still with mechanical engineers somewhere in California where there's a lot of fire hazards areas. You'll find the mechanical engineer knows inside out with a strong, solid experience firefighting codes and detected even an extra step over there. How to uh, design their sprinkler, how to design their fire extinguishers, everything when it comes to fire. That's in California, while it's not really so much in Michigan, right? You'll find mechanical engineers, and let's say in Alberta as well. You don't go really details when what they call NFPA 13. They're not gonna go and sink their teeth in. So localizing, this is just one aspect. This is just temperature and forecast. Now let's talk about AHD, authority having restrictions. It's different somewhere, even in Canada, in Alberta, between Edmonton and Calgary. The lighting spillage, the sound systems that needs to be designed, and the DBs that can go outside for each restriction is different. Uh, Code utilization, which code? I know we were working on a job in Mississippi. They work with the old code, and that's the enforced code at this part of the world. Yet somewhere like I don't know, Ontario, they need the today's code, the up to date code. They're working with it, and nothing else. Yes, of course, there's the culture part of it,
Yeah, and I think a
knowing the
lot of people
utility company.
underestimate that in my own imagination, because if I were like in my mind, and again, I'm not an engineer by any means, nor a project manager, but in my mind, you would assume, and this is probably the mistake most people get into, is that you would assume that if you just go with any engineering company, you find like you quote unquote, you Google it, you're like, oh, this is the best engineering company, and they don't have a localization presence, right? They're not in your geographic region, like they're not even there. But you heard that they're one of the best. You go and you hire them, and then you think to yourself that they could figure out the codes and everything very quickly. But the truth is, it probably takes a really long time for them to even
Oh yeah,
climatize to understand what they can do, what they can't do, what the rules are, what the rules aren't. And I'm sure that's a huge bottleneck, and that's a bottleneck most likely you as the client or the customer is probably paying for. Like you're paying for them
Oh,
to learn, I would
yeah,
imagine.
yeah, they were, yeah, they pay for the learning curve. That's why we make sure we always say, you know what, and this goes along everything. I don't think it only goes for engineering and architects. Just the engineering people think it's a straight way. It's one way, and it's just all the same. No, it's not. Authority having restriction, for example, and the culture dictates a lot. What people like to see architecturally, for example, I speak for architects. Both parents are architects, so it gives me a little bit of credibility there. They, for example, the way they look at things somewhere in Arizona again is different, totally different. What they look at and how they were architect and choosing the colors and everything somewhere in the state of Chicago, for example. The culture aspect of things and being around the majority of people in that local area it takes a lot. It goes a long way. Goes a long way. So what we try to do is, as much as we can, is let's say which we did. We had a job in North Carolina and we had another job in South Carolina, and most of our work is in Michigan. So what we have done, we have actually hired a team from North and South Carolina, even though we were capable of utilizing the code. It's the same code, for electrical, for example, NFPA 72, NEC, National Electrical Code, almost identical in many things. Yet we knew there'll be some differences that we don't want the client to pay for, as you mentioned. So we actually hired a team in North Carolina, stationed in North Carolina, and we worked with them. Same thing, we hired a team in South Carolina that we did most of the work, and they did the final touch-ups and did the tweaks to suit the South Carolinians and North Carolinians. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, and I'm sure your clients appreciate that because that seems like a huge thing because the cost of engineers and architects isn't it's not cheap. You know what I mean? So if there's a way that you
So,
can streamline it or make it easier or speed it up, I'm sure your clients must appreciate that.
oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Of course, we learned the hard way. Frankly, I mean, earlier projects we did the job the way we do it normally anywhere else, and then we find the city, for example, not accepting our drawings. Why? And all I can say is it's a cultural difference. It's this city looks at our drawings and wants more details or want less details, and we, because we're not from that region, we think we did our great job. Yet when we start hiring people in every job for every location under our liability, of course, and everything, we start to see the difference. We start to see, city approving our drawings way faster. We start to have more and more connections with the city personnel, and they start to look at our logo. Um, I mean, I'm sure when engineers come in, they will know that the more the city know you, the easier they or the faster they can let your drawings get approved. In our cases, and the more they
Yeah,
know about that hey, we need to pay more attention to this logo, then it takes more time, and which is we're our developers or our clients are really keen on time. Yeah.
yeah, no, I would imagine that that'd be the case for sure. Like that makes sense. Now, here's the thing that I've always wondered, and you kind of
Mm,
were walking into that direction, but we didn't go into it just yet. Now, here's what I'm wondering. So if I'm this big, huge company, right? Let's take the
yeah.
opposite perspective. I'm this giant
Mm,
juggernaut of a firm. I'm
mhm,
humongous, right? And
yeah.
realistically speaking, I don't know anything of the details, right? Like I am just this giant firm that's just pushing out stamps left and right. Now, under what circumstances do you think these giant firms actually know what they're doing in the project versus how much do they actually rely on outsourcing to different engineering firms in general because they're just so big that they don't bother with any of it? Like, what's that ratio look like? How's it all work?
Well, what you just said, so big firms started to recognize this challenge. And we have seen nowadays that the big firms started to um, acquaint more and more localized firm, either by partnership, joint ventures, or anything from the same nature. The reason for that is what we discussed earlier. That bigger firms at one point they start selling their brand, not their actual work. And the CEO or the BOD board of directors, I'm not gonna say they have no clue what's happening in specific projects, but I would say at its best, they have an overarching clue what's happening on their location and the challenges that they have. And the communication between higher management and lower management and younger engineers is long and sometimes because of the bureaucracy can be very painful. Uh, so we found a trend lately. It's not very, I cannot say, well, it's a trend, but it's not really a trend. The bigger firms now, let's say we had a firm that is going big without mentioning names. They looked because they didn't have a location in Alberta and they had a location in BC and Seattle. That's how they expand. They don't hire people from within. No, they acquaint a company like Omar's Engineering and so forth in that region, and you work for them for some time. Now they bought both. They bought the expertise, employees, and which is a great idea. But that shows you the importance of localizing and how this problem of bigger firms not seeing what's happening on the ground or higher management not seeing what's happening on the ground can be really problematic. And that's what I mean. Probably I'm I'm biased here, but I'm trying. I'm gonna try not to be. But usually, if I would hire someone and for my own building or for my own manufacturing facility, I would probably hire a mid-sized company. Because a mid-sized company, I can pick up the phone and call the partners. I can call the owners. I know they're more agile. I know they're not really robust on their procedures and their rules and regulations internally. That's what you usually hit when you deal with bigger firms. They tend to well, sorry. So how many times you've heard from them? Hey, sorry, sir, this is not as per our regulations or standards, and that sometimes gets frustrating because agility is so important in our work and even our PMI, which is one of the biggest project management facility, project management institute. They switched to agile project management instead of the back in the day waterfall because how agility is important. You don't find this flexibility in bigger firms, yet you can find it in a smaller firm. And they're eager to learn, and they're eager to expand, and they're eager to make things right, and they're eager to give you good customer service. So, and you'll find that mid-sized firm, the CEO or the owner has done it all. So when they give you the advice or they give you the right consultation, it's always realistic and it's always, they really know how to hit the nail on its head. Um, of course, this is from my side. I'm sure that if you brought someone from bigger firm, they'll say, your guys. But this is again
No,
from
well, of course, a
that's what I
big
would do from
firm
my side.
has its benefits for sure, right? Like, of course, there's
Mm,
some benefits to it. But what I'm wondering, if we go and focus a little bit abroad now, like I know there's a lot of development happening in certain countries in the world, specifically in Saudi Arabia, right? We know that this is a booming place right now. A lot of people are going there and developing there. Even if I talk to some of my own friends, they're like, Tarek, you should just pack your bags up and just rent a building over there and you'll just start printing money. So let me ask you, as an engineer, as the CEO, your experience right now, seeing how things are developing there, what advice would you actually have to people in power there to make to basically make sure that they're on the right trajectory? What kind of tips or advices would you have for people on the ground there trying to have these great plans and these great visions and these great milestones? What kind of
yeah,
advices do you actually think would be of value to them, because since everyone's in there and everyone's trying to make money, right? Like it's a well-known fact, I think, at this point, that it's just crazy amount of money there. I don't know how many people keep telling me, go there, sell this, do that, sell that. It's every day in my ear someone's trying to tell me, just get on the plane there, you'll figure it out.
No, no.
But for the people that are there, what advices do you have for the actual people there that are trying to make their country a better place? What things are easy things that some people might be taking advantage of? What are some easy things that could help make a huge difference in their overall scheme?
Um, well, I'm a firm believer of knowledge. The more knowledgeable you are, the better you will take the right decision. And if you don't have the knowledge, there's no shame in this. Bring someone who knows the knowledge and teach, which is really happening. Uh, the only challenge that I see with this, and I think they do recognize that, okay, we need to bring more and more knowledgeable people to learn, and so we can implement our dreams according to our own culture. And I see that's happening. The only challenge is that they work in parallel. They are learning at the same time they're constructing, which can be a little bit challenging. How to learn, because learning needs time and knowledge needs time. How to do that? How can I be first year engineer by in the morning, and by nighttime I'm working on this consultant firm, I'm doing actual engineering. It's really tiring, it's really time consuming, and I think this will be an ongoing challenge. But I always say start with learning and knowledge. The minute you have the knowledge, you'll be able to ascend the right firm. You're probably not going to need to look at the big names, because sometimes big names will give you a regular employee who yeah, he's backed up by a big firm, but you know at the end of the day you're dealing with the project manager or the director, maybe doesn't know so much. But when you have the knowledge, you will have the wisdom to pick the right personnel, the right company. You'll be able to assess them correctly. So I always say, and probably if this podcast goes through and through, you'll hear me all the time saying knowledge, 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 learning, learning, learning. I always encourage all young engineers to continue learning anything. But continue hitting the books, continue listening to teachers, continue listening to professors, and learn, and you'll make something of yourself. So that would be my biggest advice for everyone, including the young, I would call it the young Saudi now.
Yeah, I actually feel that applies to every industry, to be honest. Like even for us, right? When we're trying to up our game or improve our skill set in the public relations game, I'm always like, me, my team, we're constantly looking out for what some other people are doing. Like, what's happening in the field? You know what I mean? You don't want to be in your ivory tower thinking you know everything, and then this 15-year-old shows up, does something, and you're just, oh, where did that come from? You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
even in our industry specifically, we always are just spending time learning what's
yeah,
new, what do people like, because it's constantly changing. Like, there's an evolution. So I'm sure even in architecture, designs change. I'm sure codes change. Everything keeps changing. So you have to
yeah,
always stay up to date. So I don't think there's a single industry where stagnation has any benefit. You know what I mean? And I think it's so
no,
true. Like, just learning, learning, learning. It's probably
yeah,
one of the most important things to stay relevant, to stay up to date, and to actually know your industry. The whole reason why you and I are able to communicate so freely and so easily is because of all the knowledge and experience that you've had over the years, and all the knowledge and experience that I have in the years. Like,
of
I'm not an
course.
engineer. I don't know anything about engineering, but here we are having an engineering podcast. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I think it speaks to the nature of your knowledge, right? Like, I
yes,
could just literally throw any question at you,
yeah,
and you can answer it. You know what I mean? And I
yeah,
think it's
yeah,
it's amazing that that sort of thing actually exists. So just like we started off the show saying that this show's for everybody, I am part of that everybody. So the
yeah.
fact that Ammar, the CEO, this brilliant guy, is able to talk to
Thank you.
somebody like me about
Yeah,
engineering and what the goods are and what the bads are, I think it speaks volumes So I think that's,
Come on, you're the one who brought all
chapeau,
this
monsieur,
together.
chapeau, as they say.
You brought all this together, right? So one thing also that I find that you give, for example, I spoke with you. Remember when we sat in that Turkish cafe? I told you what I have in mind, and I listened. This is another thing, and whenever I'm talking and you ask me questions, you listen. Listening is huge. Listening with an open heart, and then you decide. Sometimes people think when I tell them listen, or hey, it's advised to listen, or you know how our parents used to tell us when little kids, hey, listen to me. It's a
Hmm.
huge advice because listening and people think when we say listen, that means you have to do what I say. No, it just listen, assess, and work accordingly. At the end of the day, I remember, if you don't mind me go off a little bit in the Quran. There's a verse that says, "الذين يسمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه," which means for those who listen to the talk or the words and then they follow what is best. So at the end of the day, even the creator give you the choice to decide, but the order was to listen, to listen. So I always learn this. Young engineers, I mean, I'm sure we'll bring some of them, our team, young team. The one thing that I always do, and I make sure I always do, even if I don't have time, I make time and I listen. Doesn't necessarily that I go, and I always tell them, it doesn't necessarily that I go with your advice or your consultation. Thank you, but I might not go with it. But I will give you my undivided attention. I will listen. I will assess, and it's my choice to pick what you just said or no. That will probably be my second advice after learning and knowledge, is to listen, and then you assess and you do the decision. Now, just from heart to heart here.
No, it's huge, actually. I'll tell you something. I have sat in, I don't know if the number is hundreds or dozens. I'm not sure. I don't think it's thousands. Thousands sounds like a lot, but maybe even thousands, not thousands, but a lot of
Remember, we're
meetings. The point
older,
is, I'm
Tariq.
just,
We
I've
have to
sat in a
count,
lot
right?
of meetings, and and one thing that I've always noticed, because in our industry, and I'm sure it's similar in your industry, is that you're bidding for work. You're tendering. You're creating proposals. You're working hard to get the job. You know what I mean? It's not just given to you. And
Yeah.
one thing I've always noticed that when I'm on that initial call and I'm trying to understand, one comment that I hear so often is when we're at these discussions, people are always amazed by my listening skills. And I'm not trying to just, but in general, it's not something you're making up when you're saying listening is important. No, no, no. I really believe what distinguishes a successful agency or firm is that ability to actually listen, to hear what the problems are and build according to that, because so many people are coming in with that preconceived notion that this is what you need, this is the best
Yes,
situation, I'm going to make the
100%.
most money here, don't think about anything else. And the actual client has his own ideas that are just
Yeah,
completely being ignored. And when they feel that you're listening to them and you're giving them advice based on their concerns, I think that's a whole different
oh
kind
yes.
of building or a different kind of agency or different kind of anything that the client just loves so much more. And I'm really happy you mentioned listening, because as obvious as it is, as we have two ears and it's so obvious to listen, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that most people don't do.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And sometimes,
I think it's the biggest thing. Like,
yeah,
you hear so many times in books, I got two ears and one mouth, and I got to listen more than I talk. But I really feel the mouth kind of gets ahead of
it's
itself. You
it's
know
an
what I mean?
instinct. It's a human urge to talk.
Yeah,
I talk a lot,
absolutely.
Tarek, so please don't mind me.
Yeah, no, and this is a podcast, so we will be talking quite a bit. But we're hoping that we're giving you good information to listen to. You know what I mean?
Yes,
No,
yes, for sure.
absolutely.
Oh, yes,
All right,
that's the
Ammar, I
whole
have I
idea.
have one more question, a pretty good
Mm,
one, and then we could probably wrap it up from there. But I really
mhm.
wanted your take on this. This has been something that's been on my mind for the past week or so, and I wanted to ask you, when you are deciding on how to do the work, what is probably the biggest factor in doing the actual job or creating the actual building or doing the actual efficiency improvements? Like, what is your priority? Like when you're scoping out a work, or a project rather, what is that key focus that you want to make sure of? Where do you distinguish yourself to be different than other firms and other agencies? Like how do you make sure that this is actually what I need to do? This is where my actual focus is. How do you come to that conclusion that this is the goal or the target?
Uh, well, I don't know if this will sound good or not, Tariq, but I always work for the projects. I do appreciate the clients, of course, and I do listen to them carefully. But if the client is vision this is not engineering wise or technically is not going to suit the project, I would educate our clients why this is not a very good idea, or there's a better way to do things, and I take the time to teach. And I have many. I had clients. There's different sectors of engineers. I had a client, and he's now a very good friend of mine, who thought that engineers are all the same: mechanical, like electrical, like structural, architect. We are all the same people. We all do the same work. So when he's asking me a question, a mechanical question or structural, I don't have much information. My background is electrical, and they keep insisting that how you don't know. Well, and I keep telling them, if you go to a heart surgeon, probably is not going to know much as family doctor, for example, right? Or vice versa. So, and by the way, he was a doctor. so, so,
Of
so,
course he was. Of course he was.
so that was the way I put it made sense to them. I do work for the project, and I do know that the client has a scope of work, and I make sure that the client knows their scope of work, of course, after discussions. And then I adopt their vision, and I adopt the project that they're trying to build. I sometimes defend the project more than anything else, because I know the minute that project is successful, the clients will be very happy. So it's a win-win for me to work for the project, not work for the client. And that doesn't mean that I disregard the client. The client is a client at the end of the day. I mean, my invoices get cleared from the client, the vision comes from the client, and everything comes from the client. Yet, the minute we shake hands, we all now work for that project. We all want success for this project. We all want that business to happen, and it just rolls. There's a role of a client, and a role of an engineer, a role of a contractor, a role of a management. We all work for that baby that is called the project. So enough customer service we give. Probably this is something that many of our clients, they appreciated in us, and positive feedbacks. Uh, Good customer service, and they also appreciate the way we listen to them, and the way we are sincere and commit to their vision, and their project. And each client has their own vision, and we have that flexibility to, okay, we will work based on your vision, not based on what we think, but for the sake of the project, for our new baby. So I hope I put this eloquently, but yeah, I don't know.
No, it's great. It's great, and I think that's a perfect way to end today's show. That was great. Like because
One thing,
one thing, and I didn't want to be the one to end, but I might fade on this. Is that you said you work for the project, and I think that's very important because you spend time to educate the client to make sure that they come out to the right conclusion. So even though you may believe that this is the right way, if your client doesn't understand it, then that's a problem. And the fact that you
yes,
spend the time to educate them and let them understand the pros and the cons, so they can be on the same wavelength or the same panel, I think that's incredible. There was a survey that we actually conducted for one of our clients, and they wanted to know what was the takeaway from the meeting that they just had. So they have a meeting with one of our clients, and then they would go and we would ask them, okay, what was your understanding of what that meeting was? It was a survey
mm,
we had to do because there was this customer feedback concerned that maybe people aren't understanding what they're being told. And
Yes.
when the client that we represent was talking to their people, he would give them results. He would tell them, there's an approximate success rate of 95%, right? He would tell them there's a success rate of 5%. But when we did our survey and spoke to those people, they believed they had success rates of 65%. So even by you
Mm.
explaining things once, most people
Yes.
don't actually get it. So the fact that you take the time to explain and make sure they understand and you educate, I'm telling you, that goes a long way. That
Oh
goes a long way for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we do actually, maybe it was a coincidence that we do mentorship to some of the universities and young engineers and still in the university. So probably that helps to, you know, you explain
Yeah,
to young
absolutely.
engineers and say at the university how the world is out there and do some mentorship can help or did help with speaking with our clients for sure. Yeah, I'm trying to educate them.
No,
Oh yeah,
for sure. For sure.
yes.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right,
One thing
everyone.
you
I
need,
think
I
that's
think,
a wrap. We are so happy that you are here joining us for our second podcast. We will continue on this podcast thing, behind the hard hat. We hope you had a great time. My name is Tariq Ibrahim, and I'm here
um,
with
Ammar Omar.
Ammar Omar, and we will see you again next time on Behind the Hard Hat. Thank you so much, everyone. Take
I
care.
guess. Yeah.
Bye bye.